Do you want to sleep? Then listen to me. Turn off the lights, close the windows, now close them and listen to you. Finally, I will make a request to you. Put down your phone and listen to my voice. Listen clearly. I will now tell you a story that will make you sleepy. Close your eyes and listen carefully to my words.
Long ago, when the world was still full of mystery and shimmering magic, there stood a city unlike any other. A place where scholars wandered marble streets, traders sailed in from distant lands, and the scent of cinnamon and sea breeze drifted through the air. This was Alexandria. But Alexandria had a secret. Far across the harbor, on a small island called Pharos, something extraordinary was rising from the shoreline. Every day, workers carved stone by hand, their hammers ringing like distant bells. Architects unrolled long scrolls filled with impossible designs, and sailors, standing on the decks of their ships, whispered to one another, "When it's finished, it will shine brighter than the stars." One such sailor was a young deckhand named Nadir, whose dreams were as big as the sea itself. Nadir had sailed since he was a boy, helping guide ships through the tricky currents around Alexandria. He knew how dangerous the dark nights could be. Many vessels were lost in the fog, swallowed silently by hidden rocks. So when he heard of the great tower being built, a tower meant to guide travelers safely home, Nadir's heart glowed with hope. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean like a golden coin, Nadir rowed his small boat toward Pharos Island. The sea was calm, the oars leaving ripples that shimmered like liquid silver. Above him, stars began to wake. The unfinished lighthouse rose from the shore like the skeleton of a giant, tall, silent, and full of promise. As Nadir approached, he felt something strange, a soft hum, like the low, warm drone of a lullaby, seemed to pulse from the stones themselves. He paused, listening. The lighthouse was alive.
Or at least it felt that way. A gentle breeze brushed his cheek. The waves rocked the boat in steady, sleepy rhythms. Nadir rested his hand on the tower's base. Warm. Impossible, he thought. The stone should have been cold at night, yet it radiated a gentle, comforting heat, as though the tower held a tiny sun deep within its heart. Then he heard it, a voice, soft as moonlight, distant as a dream. "Welcome, traveler." Nadir froze. The humming deepened, carrying the voice again, kind, calm, ancient. "When the time comes, you will help me shine." A shiver passed through the young sailor, not of fear, but of wonder. The Lighthouse of Alexandria wasn't just a tower. It was a guardian, a guide, a sleeping giant waiting to awaken. And Nadir, somehow, was part of its destiny. The waves whispered, the stars twinkled, the tower hummed like a lullaby. And as Nadir drifted gently to sleep inside his little boat, the lighthouse watched over him, its stones glowing faintly like embers, as though dreaming of the light it would one day cast across the world.
Because you listen, because you see, and because one day, when the sea is darkest, I will need you. Nadir's heart fluttered, not with fear, but with the strange, quiet certainty that his life had just changed. How can I help? He asked. The lighthouse hummed softly, like a giant breathing in its sleep. For now, you learn. Come back each night, and I will show you how light is born. A warm breeze curled around him, carrying the scent of salt and sunrise. The glow faded slowly, returning the lighthouse to its silent, unfinished stillness. Nadir stepped back, breathless. In the distance, he could hear the faint shouts of workers arriving on the mainland. Morning was waking up. And as he pushed his little boat back into the water, one thought anchored itself deep in his chest. The lighthouse had chosen him, and its secrets were only beginning to unfold.
Lessons of light. That night, Nadir returned to Pharos Island exactly as the sun slipped behind the waves. The sky glowed with dusky shades of rose and gold, and the first stars peeked out like curious eyes. He rowed quietly, oars dipping into the water with soft shoo, shoo, shoo sounds. Each stroke of the paddle felt easier than usual, as though the sea itself was guiding him back to the lighthouse. When he reached the island, the tower stood waiting in silhouette, tall and still against the twilight. The scaffolding creaked in the breeze, and the stones looked pale and sleepy in the fading light. But Nadir felt it, a hum in the air, a warmth beneath the ground, a welcoming presence. He placed his hand on the same spot as before. At once, the stone lit up beneath his palm, soft and slow, like a lantern being coaxed awake.
Welcome back, little sailor.
The voice drifted from deep within the tower like a tide rolling through a cave. Calm, ancient, warm. I came to learn, Nadir said. A gentle pulse of gold rippled across the carvings.
Then tonight, said the lighthouse, you will learn the first rule of light.
Nadir's breath hitched as the glow traveled upward, illuminating the lower stones. The air shimmered with dust motes that looked like drifting stars.
Light, the tower whispered, begins long before it shines.
Nadir frowned softly. What does that mean?
A low chuckle vibrated through the stone. Sit, child. Let me show you.
Nadir lowered himself onto the sand, leaning back against the warm tower wall. The sea lapped gently nearby, and the night air was cool enough to make him pull his cloak tighter. The glow from the lighthouse dimmed to a soft, steady pulse, like a heartbeat.
Close your eyes, the voice said.
Nadir did. Darkness. Soft. And then a speck of light appeared in his mind. Tiny, far away, drifting in a vast sea of black.
This is how light begins, the lighthouse whispered. As a thought, a hope, as the smallest spark inside the deepest dark. The little speck grew brighter. Nadir felt warmth spreading through him, gentle, soothing, like a blanket straight from the sun. Light is patient, the tower said. It gathers itself in silence. It grows quietly. It waits until someone needs it. The speck expanded until it filled his vision with soft golden glow. Nadir felt calm settling into his chest like a tide washing over a shore. He opened his eyes. The lighthouse's stones were glowing again, brighter than before, yet still tranquil, like the moon's reflection on water.
Is that how you will shine?
Nadir asked. Yes, the tower murmured. but only when the world grows dark enough. Something about that line made Nadir shiver, though the night was warm. Dark enough for what? He whispered. The glow faded just a little, like a sigh. For me to be needed. Nadir nodded slowly, understanding more than the words alone could explain. The lighthouse wasn't just being built, it was preparing. The waves whispered along the shore, a soft breeze brushed Nadir's hair, and the tower hummed again, low and gentle, almost like a lullaby meant just for him. He stayed there until his eyelids grew heavy and the stars overhead blurred into one glowing sky. When he finally rode home beneath the moon's silver path, he felt different, warmer inside, brighter. Because now he knew, light isn't just something you see, it's something you carry, and the lighthouse was teaching him how to carry it.
In the days that followed, Nadir found himself drifting through his chores with a secret glow inside him. As he coiled thick ropes on the docks or scrubbed the deck planks until they gleamed, he felt the lighthouse's warmth still humming faintly in his palms. But he visited Pharos only at night. Every evening, once the harbor fell quiet and the fishermen's lanterns bobbed away into darkness, Nadir slipped into his little boat and rowed toward the sleeping giant on the island. Tonight, however, he wasn't alone. As he pushed off from the shore, someone stepped out from behind a stack of crates. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a cloak the color of soot and a beard sprinkled with silver. Master Thalos, the harbor keeper. He was a man of few words and many stories, respected by sailors throughout Alexandria. Nadir froze, feeling his stomach twist. Thalos studied the boy a moment, then scanned the dark path of water leading toward Pharos. "Late time for rowing," the old man said, voice deep and steady. Nadir swallowed. "I'm just going to the island, sir." A slow nod. "I know," Thalos murmured. "I've seen your little boat returning before sunrise, more than once." Nadir's heart stuttered. "Sir, I can explain." But Thalos lifted a hand, silencing him gently. "No need. I only ask one question." Nadir waited, breath tight in his chest. Thalos' eyes, sharp as a falcon's, tired as an old sea, rested on the boy's face. "Did it speak to you?" Nadir froze. His pulse thudded in his ears. "It?" he whispered. Thalos' gaze drifted to the silhouette of the lighthouse, tall and dark against the star-washed sky. "The tower," he said softly. "The stone. The heart of Pharos." Nadir's voice came out barely above a breath. "You know?" "Of course I know," Thalos said, almost gently. "I was the boy who rowed out there before you, many years ago." Nadir stared at him, stunned, silent. The harbor keeper stepped closer, lantern light flickering across his weathered face. "The lighthouse speaks only to a chosen few," Thalos continued. "It awakened for me once, not fully, but enough for me to hear its dreams." He placed a hand over his chest. "And I have carried that light ever since." Nadir felt a strange warm shiver pass through him. "Why me?" he whispered. Thalos' eyes smiled very faintly, not with his mouth, Nadir noticed, but with something in his eyes. "Because the sea listens to you, boy, and the tower trusts the sea." The breeze rustled the ropes. A gull cried somewhere overhead. The night smelled of tidewater and distant spice caravans. Thalos stepped aside from the boat, clearing the path. "Go," he said, "learn what it wishes to teach you. But remember this." His voice lowered, becoming almost a warning, yet still wrapped in kindness. "One day, its purpose will wake in full, and when that happens, the world may be darker than you can imagine." He touched Nadir's shoulder. "When that day comes, you must not be afraid." Nadir's throat tightened. "Will I be able to help it? Truly?" Thalos nodded once. "I believe you are already." For a moment, Nadir felt taller, braver, steadier, like the lighthouse itself was standing inside him. He climbed into the boat. The lantern light flickered on the water. Thalos watched him push away from the dock, silent as a shadow. As Nadir rowed across the dark harbor, the lighthouse rose in the distance, and the humming warmth he'd come to know flowed out across the water to meet him. Almost like a greeting, almost like a promise. Tonight, the tower had more to teach, and Nadir was ready.
The moment Nadir stepped onto Pharos Island, he felt it. A steady, rhythmic pulse beneath the sand, like a heartbeat. Slow, ancient, deep as the sea itself. The lighthouse was awake, not glowing fully, but humming with a quiet anticipation, like it had been waiting for him all evening. Nadir approached, placing his palm against the smooth stone. Warmth blossomed instantly beneath his hand. "Welcome back, child of the waves." The voice was stronger tonight, still soft, still soothing, but clearer, as though the tower were no longer whispering from its dreams, but speaking from its waking self. Nadir sat at its base, leaning against the warm stones the way a child might lean against a parent's arm. "Master Thalos said he heard you too," Nadir murmured. "Long ago." A gentle vibration rippled through the tower, almost a sigh. "Yes, he was a good listener, but you hear me differently." Nadir blinked, surprised. "Differently? How?" The carvings on the stone flickered faintly, like tiny stars breathing. "You hear not only my voice, but my silence." Nadir thought about that. The lighthouse was silent often, resting between its hums, its whispers, its pulses. But he had always felt something in those quiet spaces, a presence, a waiting, a promise. "What are we learning tonight?" Nadir asked gently. The lighthouse hummed, low and warm, like a chord played by the earth itself. "Tonight, you learn the second truth of light." Golden ripples traveled up the tower, brighter than before, though still soft enough to soothe the mind. Nadir breathed in deeply. The air around him felt thicker, glowing faintly like starlight turned warm. The tower's voice wrapped around him. "Light is not only something that shines outward." The glow intensified, spreading like dawn across the stone. "It is something that shines inward first." A breeze swept across the island. The waves grew calm, their sound soft and slow, almost sleepy. "What does that mean?" Nadir asked. The lighthouse answered by letting its glow gently surround him. a cocoon, a radiance, a warm, invisible embrace. Close your eyes. He obeyed. At once, he felt the world soften. No wind, no waves, no cold. Just warmth, like a lantern glowing inside his chest. The tower spoke quietly, almost like a lullaby. The brightest beacon in the world cannot save a ship if the captain's heart is filled with storms. Inside the darkness of his closed eyes, Nadir saw himself, a small figure surrounded by swirling shapes of shadow, doubt, fear, loneliness, the little storms every heart carries. But then, a tiny golden spark lit within the center of the shadow, small as a firefly, steady as truth. The lighthouse whispered, "Before you can guide others, you must learn to calm your own sea." The golden spark expanded slowly, pushing the shadows back, not defeating them, just softening them, turning them into gentle waves instead of crashing ones. Nadir breathed in, and the spark grew brighter. He felt it settle deep inside him, warm, steady, peaceful. When he opened his eyes, the lighthouse dimmed again to its calm heartbeat glow. Nadir wiped his cheek. He hadn't realized a tear had slipped free. "I think I understand," Nadir said softly. "Good, for the storms ahead will test that light." Nadir looked up sharply. "Storms ahead?" But the lighthouse did not answer. Its glow faded to a sleepy pulse. Its hum sank into silence. Its presence quieted, though not gone, resting, preparing, leaving Nadir with the steady warmth in his chest and a question that fluttered like a restless bird. What storm?
For several nights after the lesson of the glowing spark, Nadir returned faithfully to Pharos Island. And for several nights, the lighthouse remained gentle and warm, but quieter, almost contemplative, as though it were thinking, as though some distant tide inside the stone had begun to shift. Nadir didn't mind. He simply sat at its base, listening to the murmuring waves and the soft hum that rose only occasionally, like a sleeping giant breathing in and out. Sometimes he spoke to it about small things, how the fishermen argued over knots, how the gulls had stolen a merchant's lunch, how the sky looked more purple than blue that evening. And although the lighthouse didn't always reply, its silent warmth made him feel heard. But tonight, something was different. As Nadir approached the island, the air felt heavy. Not dangerous, just full, the way the sky feels before rain. Clouds smudged across the stars like ink. The sea rippled with a restless energy, even though no wind brushed Nadir's hair. He stepped onto the sand. The lighthouse was not glowing, not humming, not welcoming. It stood in complete stillness, its stones dark as dusk, its presence withdrawn deep inside itself. Nadir frowned. "Are you sleeping?" Silence answered him. But this silence was not peaceful. It felt tight, like holding one's breath. Nadir placed his hand on the stone. Cold. Cold for the first time since the night he'd heard the lighthouse speak. He tried again, pressing his palm more firmly. "Please," he whispered, "talk to me." For a long moment, there was nothing.
And then, a tiny pulse, barely there, like the faintest throb of a distant heartbeat, followed by a whisper that trembled like a falling leaf. "The winds are changing." Nadir's breath caught. "What do you mean?" The lighthouse's voice was strained, still soft, but thinner, like it was speaking from far, far away. "A storm approaches." Nadir shivered, though the night air was warm. "Storms come and go. We weather them. This is a port city." But the lighthouse's reply washed through him like a cold tide. "Not that kind of storm." The pulse of light flickered once beneath his hand and faded. Nadir's heart pounded harder. "What can I do? How do I help?" For a moment, there was no answer at all. Then, a weary hum rose from the stone, small, fragile, like a candle flame shrinking against a gust. "You must listen carefully, little sailor, for the lessons grow harder now." A faint glow shimmered along one carved line, then another, like the lighthouse was forcing itself to show even this small spark. Nadir knelt, leaning close. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm listening." The light flickered again, trembling. "Tonight, you learn the third truth of light." The hum faltered. The stone cooled. "Even the brightest tower cannot stand alone." Silence, deep, long, heavy as the clouds thickening above. Nadir felt the meaning settle into him like distant thunder. The lighthouse, this ancient, powerful, magical being, was afraid. And for the first time, Nadir wasn't just a student. He was needed. The wind shifted suddenly, lifting his hair. The sea rolled with a new, uneasy rhythm. Far in the distance, lightning flickered without sound. Nadir pressed his hand more firmly against the stone. "I won't leave," he whispered. "Whatever storm is coming, I'll face it with you." A final faint pulse warmed beneath his palm. Not strong, not bright, but grateful. And then the lighthouse fell silent again. Truly silent. Resting, gathering strength, preparing for the storm Nadir could feel now in the marrow of his bones. A storm not of wind or water, but of destiny.
The next day, the harbor felt wrong. Not dangerous, not chaotic, just expectant. Fishermen spoke in low voices. The gulls circled higher than usual. Even the scent of the sea carried something sharp beneath it, as though the wind was tasting change before anyone else realized it had arrived. Nadir worked as always, hauling nets, tying knots, wiping down the deck. But his mind drifted constantly to Pharos Island, to the lighthouse, silent and strained, to the cold stone that had never before felt cold, to the storm that wasn't made of wind or rain. When the sun dipped toward evening, a strange hush settled over the port. The waves softened as if listening. The sky darkened not with clouds, but with depth, like a curtain being drawn across the horizon. Master Thalos stood on the dock, staring out at the darkening water. Nadir hesitated before approaching him. "Sir?" Thalos didn't turn, but his voice rumbled softly. "You feel it too." Nadir swallowed. "The storm?" Thalos nodded slowly. "It's not here yet, but the sea knows. The birds know. The stones know." A pause, and the lighthouse knows better than all of us. Nadir stepped closer. "What kind of storm is it?" Thalos sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him.
There are storms that tear sails. His eyes narrowed. And storms that tear futures. Nadir felt his stomach tighten, but before he could ask more, Thalos placed a warm, firm hand on his shoulder. Whatever the tower taught you, hold it close. Tonight may be harder than the last. Nadir nodded, though he felt small beneath the weight of the words. He pushed off from the dock, rowing into twilight. The sky above him was a bruised purple, soft and strange. The water beneath him was unnervingly smooth, like polished glass. No waves, no ripples, just a long, flat sheet of silence. Even the oars seemed hesitant to disturb it. When he reached the island, he felt the lighthouse long before he touched it. A heaviness in the air, a pressure in the sand, a quiet so deep that it made his own heartbeat sound loud. He stepped onto the shore and approached the tower. No glow, no hum, no warmth, just the tall silhouette of stone, like a giant holding its breath. "Please," Nadir whispered, laying his hand against the cold surface. "I'm here. Talk to me." For a moment, nothing. Then, a pulse, a faint one, like a tired heartbeat. Nadir pressed his forehead to the stone. "What do I need to learn tonight?" The lighthouse answered slowly, each word sounding as if dragged up from a deep well. "The fourth truth." Another pulse, stronger but flickering, "is about trust." Nadir closed his eyes. "I trust you." The lighthouse's glow sparked faintly beneath his palm, trembling like a candle fighting a draft. "Not just me. You must trust the ones who will stand with you." Nadir frowned gently. "Who?" The lighthouse's voice stretched thin, almost cracking. "The harbor keeper." Nadir's breath caught. "Master Thalos?" "Yes," the tower murmured. "His light is dim, but steady. He will not let you face this storm alone." As if responding to the words, a distant rumble echoed far across the water. Not thunder, something slower, deeper. Nadir's skin prickled. He felt small, yet the warmth from earlier nights still glowed somewhere deep inside him. The lighthouse's voice softened, trembling like an exhausted guardian. "Hold your spark, little sailor, for you will need it soon." A stronger pulse pushed through the stone, brief, bright, desperate. The storm draws near. And just as Nadir opened his mouth to ask what he must do, the lighthouse fell silent. Utterly, completely, as though bracing itself. The wind shifted, the sea exhaled, and far on the horizon, something moved within the darkness. A shape, a shadow, a presence, and the deer felt it watching him, watching the tower, watching the light it feared.
The shape on the horizon did not move like any storm Nadir had ever seen. Storms rolled, they churned, they swallowed the sky in clouds. But this drifted, slowly, silently, deliberately. A dark mass creeping across the water, untouched by wind or tide. The sea around it moved strangely, small waves pulling away from it, as if even the ocean wanted distance. Nadir felt the hair on his arms rise. "What are you?" he whispered toward the horizon. The shadow did not answer, but he felt it. A quiet hunger, a weight like cold fingers pressing against his chest. He backed up until he touched the base of a lighthouse, seeking its warmth, its hum, its presence. But tonight, the tower was quiet stone. The storm, whatever it was, had drained it. Nadir pressed both palms to the wall, voice shaking. "Please, wake up! Talk to me! I don't know what to do!" A faint pulse flickered beneath his right hand, weak, struggling. "Listen, listen to the sea!" The words came not with strength, but with effort, like a whisper pulled through water. Nadir did as told. He closed his eyes, he breathed slowly, he let the night wash over him. At first, he heard nothing unusual. The soft lap of distant waves, the rustle of wind through scaffolding, the faint call of a gull trying to sleep. But then, underneath it all, beneath the ordinary sounds, he heard something else. A heartbeat. Not his, not the lighthouse's faint pulse, but the heartbeat of the sea itself. Slow, powerful, ancient. Thum, thum, thum. It vibrated into his palms, up his arms, into his chest. And woven inside that heartbeat was another sound, a warning, a low, trembling hum like the sea humming a word it did not want to pronounce. "Danger," Nadir whispered. He wasn't sure how he knew, he just knew. The lighthouse exhaled a faint shimmer of light like a tired sigh. "Good, you hear it." Nadir's breath shook. "What is it out there?" A pause, long, heavy. Then the answer came like the shore speaking through stone. "An eater of lights." Cold settled through Nadir's bones. "It devours beacons? It devours hope." The shadow crept closer across the sea, not rushing, not lunging, simply approaching with a terrible patience, knowing nothing could stop it. Nadir swallowed hard. How do we fight something like that? The lighthouse pulsed faintly. You don't fight it alone. The fourth lesson, trust. Nadir backed away from the tower, heart pounding. If he wasn't meant to stand alone, then Master Thalos. Without another thought, Nadir sprinted to his boat and pushed it into the water. His oars struck the surface in fast, frantic splashes, shattering the glassy calm of the sea. As he rowed back toward Alexandria, he cast one last look toward Pharos. The lighthouse, once warm and glowing, stood cold and dim, a guardian without strength, a beacon without light. But even in its silence, Nadir felt it watching him, trusting him. Behind him, the shadow drifted closer to the island, blotting out the faint shimmer of starlight above it. Ahead of him, the harbor lights twinkled like small, waiting sparks. Tonight, he would need help. He would need Thalos. He would need anyone with even the smallest flame to stand beside the coming dark. The oars kept dipping. Nadir rowed faster. The storm was almost here.
The Keeper's Lantern. By the time Nadir reached the harbor, the night felt different. Lanterns flickered uneasily along the docks, as if their flames sensed an invisible wind. The air tasted metallic, like the breath before lightning. Even the wooden planks under Nadir's feet seemed to tense beneath his steps. He didn't have to look far to find Master Thalos. The harbor keeper stood exactly where Nadir had last seen him, staring out at the sea. His cloak billowed slightly, though no wind touched the harbor. His profile looked carved from old timber. steady, worn, and unbreakable. Nadir ran to him, breathless. "Master Thalos," he gasped, "it's moving! The shadow! It's nearly here!" Thalos didn't flinch, but his eyes sharpened like a blade catching torchlight. "I thought so much," he said quietly. Nadir grabbed his sleeve. "We need to help the lighthouse! It's losing strength! It can barely speak!" Thalos finally tore his gaze from the sea and turned fully toward the boy. "Tell me what it said." Nadir swallowed. "It said the thing out there, it's an eater of lights." Thalos closed his eyes, not in fear, in recognition. "So it has returned." Nadir froze. "You know it?" Thalos gave a small, grim nod. "I've never seen it myself, but when I was your age, the lighthouse whispered stories to me." He rested a heavy hand on Nadir's shoulder. "Of a darkness older than cities, older than sails, older than fire." Nadir felt a tremor crawl up his spine. "What does it want?" he asked. Thalos looked out at the black horizon. "What all hunger wants. A place where light dares to shine." A long silence stretched between them, thick, trembling. Then Thalos straightened with sudden resolve. "Come with me." He strode down the dock with long, purposeful steps. Nadir hurried after him, weaving between barrels and coiled ropes, as Thalos led him to the old storage house near the shipwright's stall. The harbor keeper pulled a ring of keys from his belt, selected one shaped like an anchor, and unlocked the heavy wooden door. Hinges groaned as it opened. Inside, the room was dim and dusty. Old nets hung like ghostly curtains. Broken harpoons lay piled in corners. A cracked mast leaned against the wall, bleached pale by forgotten years. But Thalos ignored all of it. He walked directly to a chest in the very back, small, iron-bound, and covered with a thick layer of salt-dusted cobwebs. Nadir watched, heart pounding. "What is that?" Thalos knelt front of the chest. "A gift," he said softly, "from the lighthouse." Nadir's breath caught. "It gave you something?" Thalos didn't answer immediately. He lifted the latch with reverent care and opened the chest. Inside lay a lantern. It was unlike any lantern Nadir had ever seen. Its frame was made of aged bronze, etched with spirals that shimmered faintly in the dim light, similar to the carvings on the lighthouse's stone. The glass panels weren't glass at all, but something clearer, thicker, and glowing faintly from within, like captured sunrise. Nadir stepped closer. "It's warm." Thalos nodded. "The lighthouse gave me this when I was chosen, but I was never meant to use it." He looked at the boy with eyes full of quiet certainty. "It wasn't meant for me." A weak, familiar hum pulsed through the lantern. Nadir gasped. "That's its voice!" Thalos stood, lantern cradled in both hands, and held it out to him. "Take it." Nadir hesitated. "Me? But I'm just—" "Not just anything," he interrupted gently. "You are the one it awakened for, the one it taught, the one it trusts." Nadir reached out with trembling hands. The moment his fingers touched the lantern's handle, warmth rushed through him. A pulse of light, soft and steady, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. The lantern brightened. Just a little, but enough to paint the dusty walls in gold. Thalos stepped back. "You and I will face this storm together." He nodded toward the sea. "But the first step is yours." Nadir looked down at the lantern, at the soft glow blooming inside it like hope rediscovered. He felt the spark the lighthouse had placed in him resonate in reply.
And for the first time since seeing the shadow, Nadir didn't feel small. He felt connected. The lantern hummed again, barely, but unmistakably. The lighthouse was speaking to him through it, calling him, trusting him. Nadir tightened his grip and lifted the lantern. "I'm ready," he whispered. Far out at sea, the shadow shifted, and with the first true light in his hands, Nadir stepped into the night.
The moment Nadir stepped back into the open night with the lantern in his hands, the harbor changed. It was subtle at first, barely more than a shiver in the air, but then Nadir noticed the sound. The sea, which normally breathed in slow and gentle rhythms, had begun to murmur. Not in waves, not in wind, in whispers. Low, slithering, overlapping whispers, like thousands of voices speaking from deep beneath the surface. The hairs on Nadir's arms lifted instantly. Thalos walked beside him, his steps slow, steady, as if he'd expected this. "What are they saying?" Nadir asked, gripping the lantern tighter. Thalos shook his head. "They speak the language of the deep, and the deep does not speak to comfort." They reached the end of the wooden pier. From here, Nadir could see the water stretching out in all directions, dark, endless, and restless. And then something pulsed beneath. A faint glow. Far out, the exact spot where the shadow had first appeared. Nadir squinted. That wasn't there before. Thalos exhaled through his nose, a sound that was half sigh, half bracing. "It's drawing closer." The whispers grew louder, as if the water sensed Nadir's attention and wanted more of it. But before he could lean forward, the lantern in his hand vibrated, softly, mournfully. Light bloomed from inside its core, snuffing out the whispers around them like flame extinguishing smoke. The sea quieted instantly, the murmur receding into a trembling hush. Thalos raised a brow. "It responds quickly to you." Nadir wasn't sure whether to feel proud or terrified. Why did it react like that? "Because," Thalos said, "the lantern is not merely light. It is a signal." "A signal?" Nadir echoed. "To the lighthouse." "But we're far away from it." Thalos shook his head. "Distance does not silence ancient things." Suddenly, shore. A surge of wind swept across the harbor, rattling docks and tearing loose ropes from their hooks. The lantern flared brighter in Nadir's hands. Then, from across the bay, a beam of light flashed. Not the lighthouse's usual sweeping beam, but a sharp, concentrated pulse aimed directly at them. Nadir shielded his eyes. "Is it calling back?" Thalos stared at the pulse, jaw tightening. "No, it's warning us." The ground beneath their feet trembled. Just once. Enough to ripple the water, enough to make the lantern's glow stutter. And then a shape breached, far out at sea. A silhouette, not fully seen, yet unmistakable. Tall, thin, coiled in places where things should not bend. A suggestion of limbs or fins or something between. Nadir froze. That's not a shipwreck," he whispered. Thalos placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "No, that is the thing that devours light." The shadow sank silently back below the surface, leaving only a swirl of blackened foam. The pier creaked beneath them. "What do we do?"
Nadir whispered, voice small. Thalos turned to him, his face worn by years of storms and sleepless nights softened. We prepare, and we do not face it blind. He pointed toward a narrow stairway carved directly into the cliff beside the harbor, steep and winding. Those stairs lead to an old watchpost, a place the lighthouse used long before the city grew around it. Nadir swallowed hard. Why there? Because we need height, and because the lantern will show us what the lighthouse cannot. The wind picked up again, swirling around them, not cold, not warm, just unnatural. Nadir felt the lantern pulse in his hands. The sea whispered again, this time not words, but intention. Something was coming, something hungry. Phalos nodded toward the stairway. Come, Nadir. Tonight, we climb. Nadir took a deep breath and stepped forward, lantern held like a small sun against the encroaching dark. The first stair creaked under his foot. Far behind them, the lighthouse shone its unwavering beam into the night, a single eye watching the sea, watching them, watching the darkness rise. And as Nadir began the ascent, the sea whispered. As Nadir tilted the lantern toward the basin in the watcher's stone hand, the glow inside it gathered, slowly at first, like a deep breath drawn in. The ancient basin remained cold and empty until the lantern's light touched it. Wham! The glow leapt from the lantern as though it had been waiting centuries for this moment. A ribbon of warm, golden radiance streamed into the carved basin, filling it like water poured into a cup. The ancient basin immediately reacted. The lines ignited. Light raced across the statue's arm, following ancient grooves that had slept for thousands of years. Spirals flared, symbols blazed. The watcher's stone chest thrummed with a deep, resonant vibration, like a note struck on a colossal bell. Nadir stumbled back, eyes wide. Thalos, it's waking up! Thalos didn't move. He murmured, it remembers its purpose, and it remembers you. A tremor shook the cliff. Not violent, more like the ground shifting to make room for an old truth. Then the statue turned, not with the quickness of something alive, not with the stiffness of something mechanical, but with the slow, thunderous inevitability of the earth itself. Its hollow face pivoted toward Nadir. The basin overflowed, not with liquid light, but with a flame so bright and clear it seemed carved from the sun. A thin, steady spire of fire rose from the bowl, flickering without smoke or heat. Nadir whispered, "What is that?" Thalos answered in a hush, "That is the first flame." The ancient firelight stretched toward Nadir as if reaching. The lantern in his hand flickered in response. Nadir breathed, "It wants to join." Thalos nodded, "It must. The lighthouse alone cannot withstand what's coming." The first flame was the world's earliest warning fire, and now, after ages of silence, it answers again. Nadir hesitated. What happens when they join? Thalos met the boy's eyes, his voice steady but grave. "Then we will see what the lighthouse has been saving for all these years." Nadir took a step forward. The first flame pulsed brighter, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. He lifted the lantern. The two lights leaned toward each other like magnets pulled together. Then, thrum, whum! The flame collapsed inward and shot directly into the lantern in a surge of blinding brilliance. The lantern exploded with light, not destructively, but in a wave of pure radiance that rolled across the cliff, sweeping over Nadir and Thalos. For a moment, the world went white, and then the whiteness faded into shapes, symbols, stars, maps, all swirling inside the lantern's glass. Not random, not chaotic. It was knowledge. The lantern was showing Nadir history. Images flashed rapidly. Ancient mariners lighting fires along the cliffs, the watcher glowing in the night, the first stone of the lighthouse being placed, workers carving spirals into the walls, spirals that matched the lantern and the statue, the lighthouse flaring with a beam so powerful it pushed back an enormous shadow in the sea. Then the images shifted, forward into what felt like now. Nadir floated in the lantern's visions, seeing the coastline through impossible eyes. The sea roiled, darkness coiled beneath it, an approaching shape that dimmed every star it passed. Nadir's breath hitched. "That's it," he whispered in awe and fear, "the thing that eats light." The lantern showed one final vision. The lighthouse beam flickered, and a smaller light, his light, rose to meet it. The vision snapped. Nadir staggered, gasping, clutching the lantern as the glow settled into a steady, fierce brilliance. Inside it, the first flame burned in a tight, swirling core. Thalos reached forward, steadying the boy. "Are you all right?" Nadir nodded shakily. "I saw everything. The lighthouse, the darkness, and he swallowed. "And me." Thalos looked at the lantern, now glowing brighter than he had ever seen. "The lighthouse has chosen its heir," he said softly, "and the first flame has accepted you." Nadir stared at him, stunned. "Heir?" Thalos finally allowed a small, proud smile. "You thought you were simply helping the lighthouse?" He shook his head. "No, Nadir, you were being prepared." The wind rose again, but this time it didn't feel hostile. It felt like the sea taking a breath, a deep, cold, expectant breath. From far below the cliff, a low, thunderous groan rumbled through the waves. The darkness stirred, closer than ever. Thalos looked toward the looming horizon. "We must go to the lighthouse, now." Nadir, still trembling but determined, nodded. He held the lantern high. The first flame inside it flared, illuminating their path back down the cliff. And as they began their descent, the sea whispered once more. Not his name this time, but a warning.
The cliffside stairway clung to the rock like a pale spine, narrow and winding. From below it looked steep. From the first step, it felt endless. Nadir held the lantern close as he climbed, each step slick with sea mist. The old stone edges glowed faintly under the lantern's warmth, almost as if they remembered its light. Thalos followed just behind him, steady and silent. But the wind was not silent. It rose in thin, icy ribbons, curling around their ankles and whispering past their ears. Not quite voices, more like shapes of voices. Nadir pressed closer to the stone wall. "Are the winds always like this?" "No," Thalos said, and he did not elaborate. The wind grew louder, threading itself into eerie harmonics that seemed to hum against the lantern's glass. Now and then, the sea far below boomed against the cliff, a deep, slow heartbeat. Halfway up, the stairway narrowed even further, so thin only one of them could pass at a time. Thalos stopped. "Go ahead," he told Nadir. "I'll follow when you reach the landing." Nadir looked up. The ledge was only 20 or 30 steps away, but it felt like the mouth of another world. "Why me first?" he asked. Thalos nodded toward the lantern. "Because it will open for you
Not me. A chill prickled down Nadir's spine, but he didn't argue. He tightened his grip and climbed. Each step felt heavier than the last. The wind around him thickened, cold, intentional. It tugged at his cloak, at his hair, at the lantern, gently at first, then with the faint suggestion of pulling. Nadir stumbled. "Stop it," he whispered, as if the wind could listen. The lantern flared. A sudden halo of warm light burst outward, slamming against the wind like an invisible shield. The air hissed and recoiled. Nadir felt the pressure ease instantly. Far below, Thalos called up. What happened? It tried to take the lantern. Thalos's reply was grim. It knows what you carry. Nadir climbed faster. When he reached the landing, a small stone platform jutting from the cliff, he felt the lantern vibrate again. Not fear, not warning, recognition. A shape stood at the far edge of the platform. Nadir froze. It was tall and thin, but not monstrous like the sea shadow, not human either. It was carved entirely from white stone, weathered by centuries, its face eroded smooth except for two deep, hollow sockets. One arm extended toward the sea, the other held a bowl-like basin chiseled into its palm. A statue, ancient, watching the ocean. What is this place? Nadir whispered. Thalos reached the platform behind him, breathing a little heavier from the climb. When he saw the statue, his expression softened, but not with relief, with reverence. "This," he said quietly, "is the first Watcher." Nadir swallowed. "A guardian?" Thalos nodded. Long before the Lighthouse of Alexandria was built, this cliff held the original signal fire. Before ships had sails, before the harbor had walls, this figure stood here. Nadir stepped closer to the statue. The stone felt colder than the night air. The basin in its hand was empty, just a smooth, shallow hollow. "The lighthouse," Thalos continued, "is not the first light to defend this coast, only the strongest, and the final." Nadir touched the basin. The lantern pulsed so brightly he nearly dropped it. A glow shimmered between his fingers and the stone. Suddenly faint lines, spirals, etched patterns, the same as on the lantern, flared across the statue's arm, then faded just as quickly. Nadir gasped. It knows the lantern." Thalos nodded gravely. "It knows you, too." Before Nadir could ask what he meant, the lantern throbbed. Once, twice, exactly like a heartbeat. Then, crack! The sea below split open with a thunderous roar. A column of water shot upward, twisting into a dark spiral that caught the moonlight in jagged fragments. Something moved inside it, something huge, something stretching, unfolding. The spiral bent toward the cliff. Nadir stumbled back. "Is it coming for us?" "No," Thalos said, jaw tight. The water column crashed back into the sea with a deafening splash. "It's coming for the lighthouse." The statue beside them vibrated, just slightly, like a tuning fork struck by an unseen hand. Dust shook from its shoulders. Nadir felt the weight of 1,000 nights press onto his chest. "What do we do?" he whispered. Thalos placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and pointed toward the basin in the statue's palm. "You must give it light." Nadir stared down at the lantern in his hands. "Now," Thalos said, "the lighthouse needs you. Nadir lifted the lantern. The wind went silent. The sea held its breath. The watcher's hollow eyes seemed to widen, and the lantern, the little sun he carried, began to pour its glow into the ancient stone bowl.